Welcome back. This is the Catholic Lady, and we're reading Great Lion of God by Taylor Caldwell. This is chapter 23. Your friend and your pupil, Saul, recalls to me the story of Ixion in Hades, the accursed one who whirls about with soundless howls, following and fleeing from himself, said Iantha to her husband Aristo. Aristo regarded her with admiration. He adored his wife more than ever. To him she was both Artemis and Aphrodite, elusive like a nymph and as sturdy as Hades. She was a constant delight. He never knew if she was stupid or very wise, and he dearly hoped he would never find out. Her comment on Saul was profound and subtle, but she had spoken it with the blandness of a child and the detectable sweetness of a witless woman. She was truly delicious, and he thanked the gods, in whom he did not believe, that he had discovered such a treasure, with a large dowry. He said, Ixion, yes, my unfortunate Saul. He does not know that he dwells in Hades and walks the fields of Aphrodite and inhabits the twilight and sleeps with despair. Like many Jews, he is haunted by his God. Yet his father was once gay and light of heart, and had a humor, and his conversation was fascinating, and his sister is a veritable minor deity of much beauty and charm. His mother was not a woman of mind, and she was trivial and frivolous, but she laughed happily and resembled a statue, and had graces and could sing. From whence this stormy young man came is a great mystery. Still, when a child and a youth, he had a boisterous laugh and a wry wit, and much impulsive kindness, and simmered with life, and his countenance would dance like wine in the sun. If he lives in Hades, he has ventured there of his own will, and was not driven there by circumstance. And if he has espoused despair, he sought her out, preferring her groans to love's embraces. He is not handsome, said Iantha. Perhaps the girls avoid him. Why does he not marry? He has dedicated himself to his God, like the king of Nemi, said Aristo. Iantha gave him an amused glance that repaired to her kitchen. Iantha gave him an amused glance, and then repaired to her kitchens to oversee her husband's afternoon meal. He had discovered another joy in her. She was an excellent matron, and it was her hand which seasoned the dishes at the last moment so that they made the tongue ecstatic. He went out for a moment to contemplate his land with contentment, his wide groves and orchards, his cattle and his sheep, his horses and his asses, his outer buildings which surrounded his pleasant house, and then the wide river running in gold below the scarlet mountains of Tarsus. He thought about Saul with a certain melancholy. Saul had delayed his return to Jerusalem, and had lived alone in his father's house with the servants who had been freed according to the law on Hillel's death. But though Aristo invited him often to his own house, he had lured him there but twice, and others also invited him. Saul was more solitary than ever. He had told Aristo that it was his intention to return to Jerusalem before the high holy days in the autumn, but it was autumn now, and he still lingered. There was a certain silence and lassitude about him which no kindness or affection could penetrate. Indeed, a kind of apathy had seized on the lonely young man. Each morning he told himself that the next day he must return to Israel, and the days passed and he remained. He felt as if he were one who had been banished from the theater, in which drama was being enacted, and great choruses were speaking, and the gates had been closed to him, and he did not know why. When the thought occurred to him, he laughed at himself for his notions. He spent many hours in his father's library, and many hours in the gardens, standing on the black arched bridge over the pond on the very spot he had been told his father had stood, and had there been taken by vertigo and fallen into the water. Saul gazed down for long periods into that water, and a few times he had been deluded that he saw Hillel's body lying there, the garments rippling gently, the white face closed and peaceful. Saul went to his parents' tomb, but he felt that Hillel did not lie there, but lay in the water of the pond. He tried to visualize his father in his seat in the world hereafter, praising God with the seraphim and the cherubim, his radiant face reflected in the bright sea of glass. But he could only see his father sleeping, as if waiting. His sister Sephora wrote him in her usual merry fashion, and he did not discern her anxiety for him, and her love in the richness of her phrases. She wrote of her family, her husband Ezekiel ben David, and her beloved mother-in-law Clodia Flavius, her uncles who were eminently prosperous, and her grandfather, Shabua ben Abraham, whose health was declining, and who had lost his old placidity and ease of countenance and urbanity. But he is a very old man now, wrote the young Sephora, and he often wanders in his mind and appears distressed. Sometimes he speaks of our father testily, as if he were still alive, and a disagreeable thought to him. Yet he often asks when our father will visit him again. It is very strange. In her last letter she had written after the usual prolonged news of the family, which was tedious to Saul, who rarely thought of his mother's relatives. We have had much turmoil in Jerusalem lately, and much excited discussion, and there is much contempt and laughter. A young rabbi from Galilee has been disturbing the people, and the priests and the Sanhedrin are very anxious, for the Romans are scrutinizing him. We are very delighted that if this Galilean causes riots and rebellions, it is rumored he is an Essene, and we know how fervid such are. The Romans will destroy us once and for all. They have been lenient to Israel, as they have been lenient with none others, exempting us from military service, respecting our Sabbath, refraining from using the image of Caesar on their banners, and even minting special coins for us which do not bear the heads of their tyrants. Nor will they bring a Jew before a magistrate on the Sabbath, nor do they profane the temple, but stand in the court of the Gentiles with respect and listen to our holy men. It is true they tax us beyond bearing, but not more than they tax other peoples, and their empire is tremendous. They have shown much tolerance under provocation for our young wild men in the desert, who have abandoned the ordered world and have disdained it. But we fear that if this Galilean, who is alleged to perform prodigies of miracles, incites the people, the Romans will lose their patience and put us to the sword and burn the temple. For the last month we have drawn easier breaths. The wandering rabbi has removed himself from our midst and returned to his hills, and we deeply hope he will remain there. We who have children are always fearful and look for threats when there are possibly none. Even Saul, that scrupulous inspector of his own conscience, his own motives, his own thoughts, and their sources, could not understand why the very mention of the Nazarene should immediately inflame him with anger and disgust. He took Sephora's letter to the old rabbi, Reb Isaac, who was now bent, and his beard and hair thin and white. Once, said Saul, my sister despised the Romans, as I despise them still. And once she admired the Essenes and the Zealots, as I admire them, though I am sometimes alarmed by their excesses. One understands that she is the mother of children, and so is distressed for their possible fate. But she is not to be derided for this, but rather respected. So If Sephora, who was well taught by our father, and loves Israel as he loved it, is made uneasy by this Nazarene, and fears, then surely we all have reason to fear. Read that again. So if Sephora, who was well taught by our father, and loves Israel as he loved it, is made uneasy by this Nazarene, and fears, then surely we all have reason to fear. The old man ruminated, not moving his filmed yet still irascible eyes from Saul's flushed face. Then he said, "You have lived for a long time while in Jerusalem. Tell me, have you heard of this Galilean before, and have you seen him? Not once have you mentioned him to me." The ugly flush on Saul's freckled face deepened. "I have seen him before," he said in a pent voice. "I have heard him." The rabbi waited, but Saul said nothing. The rabbi said, "What was your opinion?" "He is an unlettered man," said Saul. "He is an ignorant Galilean, though I admit that he has eloquence. He speaks in riddles." "A common Jewish characteristic," said the rabbi. Saul made an impatient sound. "But these riddles appear to incite the people. For as for his appearance, he is as fair like most Galileans. And I, not of Galilee myself, though my family's blood on my father's side. He is not uncomely, yet not beautiful. At times he appears most ordinary. At other times, I have heard, he appears transfigured." "You do not hold him in high repute," said the rabbi. "No, he is a blasphemer, a mountebank. Surely, Reb Isaac, you have heard from your own friends in Jerusalem concerning him? He is permitting it to be said that he is the Messiah." Saul's breath came fast and his eyes gleamed with rage. "I have heard that he consorts with harlots and depraved women, and even with tax gatherers. If that is true, then he is the most degraded of men." A curious expression passed over Reb Isaac's face. Perhaps he hopes to lead these degenerate wretches to repentance. Saul stared at him. "Then you know much of him?" The old rabbi, seated in his library, turned his ancient head and gazed through the window at the golden countryside. "I know of him. Israel sees with these wandering rabbis, who sometimes perform miracles. He is one in these respects with the others. Yet we do not hear the others. Therefore he is extraordinary, not in fame, not in the world's awareness of him, but in person. Obscure, apparently unlearned, speaking only in Aramaic, without house or household or money or possessions, like the other poor rabbis. Yet he seizes on the imagination of those who encounter him. Why? Is he a prophet?" Saul felt something enigmatic in the manner and the words of the old man. He became wild with impatience. "A prophet? Never was there so bedraggled a prophet. No one less honored. Prophets do not blaspheme." The old man smiled wryly. "They were accused very often of blasphemy, and were not held in respect, if I remember the scriptures correctly. So if the Nazarene is reviled by many, as I have heard, then it is possible that he is a prophet. People never change. If I were to be asked to give one description of an authentic prophet, I would say, he was hated and despised. He was held in ridicule. He aroused the deepest hostility. He was the object of shy malice and derision and contempt. The darkest motives were assigned to him, and he was rumored to have a devil." Saul's face became transparent with pallor, but the rage increased in his eyes. "He is not a prophet," he said, and his voice was somewhat hoarse. "He is nothing. Nothing, said the rabbi, now staring at him frankly, never arouses emotion. I discern that this Nazarene disturbs you profoundly. I will not ask why. You have given me a reason, blasphemy. I do not think it is that. I think that not even you know. I know, cried Saul, clenching his strong hands on the rough linen that covered his knee. He is permitting it to be said that he is the Messiah. We know that is blasphemy, and I am dedicated to God and his revealed truth, and I am outraged that this Nazarene presumes. What does he presume? Asked the rabbi, when Saul paused. Saul did not answer. There was a light sweat on his forehead, an indication of intense agitation. And Rabbi said, when you speak of him, you are almost beside yourself. You are a young man of great passions, which you discipline. Why, then, do you become disheveled in manner and speech, and almost incoherent when this Nazarene is mentioned? Saul exclaimed, I hate him! The rabbi did not speak, but only gazed at him. He will destroy Israel, cried Saul in a louder voice. What? A miserable, beggarly Galilean, however inflammatory? Do we not have guards and magistrates and courts to subdue and suppress him? If he becomes dangerous, are you not, suggested the old rabbi, giving him too much importance in your mind? He is of no importance at all. The rabbi shrugged. Then why do we discuss him? At one moment you show me the letter from your sister, obviously as alarmed as she, and at the next moment you'll say he is of no importance at all. My son, you have not been candid with me. You say you hate the man, and that I believe, but something stirs in you at the very thought of him. He is a sorcerer, said Saul, and then found himself, in spite of his own will, speaking of the Nazarene, of the times he had encountered him, and even of his dream. His voice rose and fell in that great agitation. His hands clenched and unclenched. The rabbi listened and did not move. I'm going to pause here and we'll continue with part 2.